Okay, folks, welcome to this final thoughts video on Ardennes 44, the first edition. Now, I've just played through the complete campaign. This is the first time that I've played Ardennes 44. I have not played the second edition, haven't played the third edition. I haven't played this more than once, so I'm not quite calling this a review. Just sort of a summary on some of my feelings about this game. Off the top, I love this. This is a brilliant game. It really strikes at the heart of what I personally love about gaming. I love maps. I love looking over historical maps, operational war maps, historical maps, and so forth. And this hits at that on several levels. It's a beautiful map, very clear design. The distinction between primary and secondary roads is very clear. It can be difficult to discern those roads when they're covered by counters, particularly towards the end of the game where all the forces group together and have some sort of dense stacks. You do need sort of tweezers to get under the counters to sometimes see the road networks. But it provides the foundations for a very intense study of manoeuvring and operational warfare. Every turn, as the Germans on the attack, you are looking to see how you can get somewhere. You're looking to navigate the combination of primary and secondary roads and sometimes off-road movement to get to where you want to be, to not only do that, but to bring substantial forces such that you can initiate a strong attack on American positions. So you're studying the various paths, you're studying American defensive lines, you're looking for weaknesses, you're looking for opportunities for exploitation, you're hoping for breakthrough combat and follow-up attacks and road networks beyond the front line that you can drive down. And this is happening over a very big map. These are two roughly 22 by 34 inch maps that you're fighting over. The maps pretty much go right to the edge of the paper. There is a lot to look at, a lot to study. Factor into that the different types of vehicle and non-vehicle movement and rates, and then off-road movement costs, and it's a very complex logical puzzle that you're kind of trying to work through and solve in some sense. And I love that about gaming in general. It's why I'm so often drawn to war games. It's why I love many heavy Euro games. But this Ardennes 44, the Battle of the Bulge, does that beautifully. It's a beautiful kind of logical puzzle to work through in your mind as you're looking over the map. As the Americans, you have, well, I certainly, in my experience in this game, had a far more passive, responsive role. You're often responding to what the Germans do to some extent. You also need to think about these road networks and think about how the Germans can exploit behind your lines. So you're looking to see how the Germans might respond, and you're looking to stop them. It's a hard thing to do because you have such limited forces at your disposal, particularly in the first half of the battle. The American player is retreating, trying to disengage, trying to pull back, trying to find those positions where they won't be exploited. And it almost feels, I hate to use the analogy, but it almost feels like you're really trying to read your opponent as though in a chess match, thinking about where they could hit. And yeah, but on a much larger scale. We're not talking about an 8x8 grid here. We're talking about a huge hex-based map. So yeah, that is what I loved most about Ardennes 44. Studying the map, studying the road network, studying potential paths and routes to overwhelm the enemy in particular areas. That sort of direction and misdirection, taking sudden left turns and heading somewhere else. Not even having, I mentioned in the last video I did as part of my playthrough, this idea of having a broad plan to drive through this narrow corridor towards Bastogne, and then noticing a weak point in the American lines, and suddenly deciding to shift direction to the right and drive through a certain forest or use a secondary road to take a shortcut across somewhere. Only to then find that the Americans are blowing the bridge in front of you and you're having to detour back to the left around Bastogne or something. Now these decisions, the processes you go through change as the scenario progresses. Early in the game, there's this big German breakout against sort of scattered, isolated, weak American positions, and they're driving down these roads, fighting for St. Vith, getting around the initially blown bridges, trying to navigate their paths and weaving often through very tight corridors. Then the choices open up. If they can capture St. Vith early, where do they head? Left, right, straight ahead, southwest, northwest. So many possibilities for the Germans to explore. So you've got options then. Over the coming turns, American reinforcements begin to arrive. There's fighting out on the flanks. The Americans need to figure out where they're going to defend. The choices become much more complex and important. I mentioned in the last video of the series, for the last turn 22, the importance of planning ahead. And I mentioned this sort of 4-turn cycle that the Germans need to start thinking about. There's night turn exploitation here. And in the night turn, if the Germans can place 3 night markers in the PM turn. And in the night turn, they can move those 3 stacks only. In the night turn, they move, and then in the AM turn, they get a back-to-back movement. So they have night turn exploitation, then they immediately take the very next turn. And that provides them for an opportunity at night to attack, open up a gap, and then exploit through that gap in the AM turn. And it is so critical, these back-to-back movements, that the Germans need to plan for this long term, such that every AM turn, they should be thinking about the PM turn and getting powerful stacks into a position to get ready. In the PM turn, they're placing night markers on those stacks, getting them ready for the night turn. Whilst at the front lines, they're kind of trying to weaken American defensive positions and get a gap ready, if not open. Of course, the Americans have last say here on the day. They can respond, get their defenses ready. Then in the night turn, those 3 night stacks attack and hopefully crack open a gap in the American lines. It's then the subsequent AM phase where the Germans pour through those gaps and exploit. But in the same turn that they're exploiting and moving through those gaps in the AM turn, they should also be thinking about the next night turn. And again, preparing for the next PM turn and so forth. So it should be, as I started to realize towards the end, this constantly revolving cycle of AM, PM, night turn, exploitation, preparation, PM, night turn, AM, exploitation, and so forth. Which is just a fascinating way to think about the game and where you're moving your forces. And again, I'm saying all this as just a one playthrough rookie. There are probably more experienced players saying, yeah, well, of course, and you should be doing this as well, and you should be doing this. There's a lot to discover about this game. And this is not a big box game. This is a 2-inch G&T box. It's not huge, it's not heavy. In terms of complexity, look, it's hex encounter, movement rates, attack factors, defense factors, with a lot of chrome on top. Now, there is a lot of chrome, what we call chrome, the sort of extra layer of thematic specific rules. Things like, the red circles are anti-tank guns, the red defense rating means elite, the white defense rating means green, the bracketed defense rating means that the unit doesn't get the terrain bonus. What else can I say? The little numbers in the boxes means stacking points. All these kind of things. The divisional allocation highlighted means that the units can stack together. The stacking rules are quite complex. It took me half the game to figure those out, and I'm sure I made some mistakes early on. It is quite a lot to get your head around. It is kind of an easy game with complex chrome, but all that chrome adds to the fascination of the decision-making process. In terms of the important decisions you make around Germany in particular, regimental integrity, which they need to launch these big, powerful attacks. If you scatter your regiments everywhere, if you scatter your brigades everywhere, your divisions go all over the place, you won't be able to launch big, powerful attacks. You won't be able to hurt the Americans. You won't be able to break through the line. So keeping these formations together, understanding the importance of stacking, which I failed early on, the importance of regimental integrity, the importance of those road networks, the importance of road movement costs, the importance of what units can move through certain terrain, knowing, for example, where non-mechanized or where non-vehicle units can move is very important, because that enables those non-vehicle units to infiltrate, in effect. I keep saying infiltrate throughout the videos, infiltrate through American defensive positions. ZOC bombs, common throughout much of Mark Simich's games, is present here, and it's key to your defensive thinking mostly. The Germans aren't often thinking about ZOC bombs sort of until the later stages of the games. The Americans don't have to think about this, and I found myself often giving up good defensive positions in, let's say, a town with a +2 defense factor to instead secure a ZOC bond in a weaker defensive position. So in other words, it was more important to set up that ZOC bond to prevent the Germans breaking through. If there are two units, how can I illustrate this? Two units with a hex in the middle, this creates a ZOC bond and the Germans cannot move through here. And the importance of setting that up is more important, I found, situationally specific, than having two good defensive positions that the Germans could infiltrate through. Look, German artillery played a role. It's that column shift when they're being used could be critical at key moments. It was time consuming, getting them up to the front. The Germans have to use their prime movers to move their artillery. The story for the first half of the game was the Germans just destroying American units, which is why in my playthrough their front lines are so thinly scattered, because the Germans, I mentioned in the very first video, my strategy was to not only outflank, exploit the situation, but to destroy American units. I didn't want these Americans to be able to defend. Where possible, I wanted to surround them with ZOCs and destroy them by retreats. And I was very successful at that for perhaps the first 8, 9, 10 turns. And then it became much more difficult. And then the 23rd of December rolls around on the 15th turn, and it's very difficult. And in fact, German losses then start to build up. For the most part, I mean, let's just look at this unit. This is a 12th SS unit that starts set up on the board. They haven't suffered a step loss. There's another one here, an armoured unit, hasn't suffered a step loss. If, as a German player, you can keep your formations healthy, if you can prevent those exchange results, they can continue to fight through to the very end. If I'm looking at the 1st Division right in front of me here, I only have the one, I think, step lost among all 1st Division units. So keeping those German units healthy, I guess, provides them with that long-term fighting sustainability. The flip side of that is maybe I was too conservative with these guys. Maybe I should have been attacking more frequently. Experts are probably saying, well, if they're still that healthy at this stage of the game and you haven't reached the muse, then you haven't attacked enough with them. So there's an argument to be made for that as well. What else can I say? Look, breakdown units. I only ever broke down one unit because I found that the importance, and I mentioned this in one of the videos of the playthrough, I found the importance of defending a position at strength was more important than defending 3 scattered positions weakly. And this goes back to the Germans are trying to eliminate the Americans, they're trying to surround them and destroy them. And I found it easier to do that if they were weaker. Yeah, every point that you can add to the defense of a position makes that CRT combat odds ratios lower, and that's what the Americans want. So again, situationally specific, but I rarely broke down units. And look, again, maybe every game is different, but maybe because the Americans did relatively well with what they were doing, because there wasn't ever a big breakthrough, I never really needed to do that much. The one time I did it was out near Bastogne, and I broke down just to basically spread my line to block those roads. There weren't many other circumstances where that came up. It was something I was always mindful of, like when can I break down, when should I break down, do I need to break down? Look, there were some dire circumstances for the Americans at times, but they always felt that they were able to respond to what the Germans are doing. The British arrive late in the game and they occupy a position along the Meuse, but yeah, I don't think they can move any further, and so they hold up there. The fighting at the flanks was different to most other Bulge games that I've played. I experienced a lot of success out with the 7th Army in the south and with the 6th Panzer Army way out in the north. In both cases, I was able to really push the Americans away from the rivers, from their defensive positions. And I've been thinking about this for a couple of days, why this was the case. Why was it so easy to push out the flank? It wasn't even a struggle. And I don't know. Did I have a particular strategy here? It was to ensure at least 3-to-1 odds ratios. Try to infiltrate, surround, destroy wherever possible. So the Americans lost a lot of their flanking units. Beyond that, yeah, I don't really know. It's probably too early for me to say, having only played through it once, but I feel like combat favours the attacker. If you get the initiative, if you can concentrate your forces, if you have regimental integrity, you can pick and choose where you want to fight. You pick and choose the weakest units in a line, and you target them, and you attack them, and you destroy them. And I think that's what happened out in the flanks as well. So yeah, my feeling is that combat favours the attacker, the person with the initiative, the Germans on the attack. And it was the same when the Americans counterattacked. And for this reason, again, that idea of keeping your divisions together, divisional integrity, I should say, rather than regimental integrity, was very important to bring those big stacks and multiple stacks into the combat. Towards the end of the game, fuel shortages were really frustrating. As a German player, I hated playing that rule. It just sucks because it's random, you've got fuel, your units just can't move. You might be in a key position to attack and exploit. You've planned everything, you've got your 1st Panzer Division ready here, they're about to drive through the Meuse. Suddenly, random die roll, fuel shortage, they can't do much. I won't say anything, but they can't do much. So that was really frustrating. American air support was really frustrating. Just how, again, it's based on a bit of a die roll. If you roll a 1, that's 3 column shifts to the left, and that is crippling. Beyond, again, you can turn a 4-to-1 odds ratio with a DR4 result, with 3 retreat results, a firefight result, and so forth. A good chance of forcing a retreat into attacker losses and disruption and just hell. So, yeah, German players are going to hate those air power rules when they come out on the 23rd of December. It all kind of balances out. I mean, it doesn't quite balance out. You've got a 50-50 chance of rolling for American air support. A 4, 5, or 6 means no support, no column shift. So you can kind of expect that there will be a column shift. It means that the Germans come to expect less success in combat. They have to bring more factors to kind of secure the retreat. But again, it kind of reflects the damage caused by American air power from the 23rd of December onwards back in 1944. Traffic markers, I haven't talked about this much, nor throughout the videos, but they were very important. They were often critical there are a couple of key moments there where night movement, the Germans about to move up to exploit, and they can't reach the front line because of these traffic markers. If they could reach the front lines, if they could attack, if they could punch a hole, they could exploit in the aim turn, and traffic markers on more than one occasion prevented that from happening. So do not underestimate the importance of thinking about where you're placing these and how valuable they can be on any roads. On secondary roads, they basically stop all traffic. It's 2 movement points to move through a secondary road on wooded, plus 2 is 4 movement points. That's most of the movement allowance for most of these units. All of the movement allowance for infantry. So infantry found themselves on secondary roads not being able to move at all, apart from tactical movement. Yeah, and of course this it works on both sides. Sometimes I found the Germans not thinking very carefully about their grief markers and ended up blocking their own movement. Yeah, that was frustrating. There's a lot more I could say, but I will close just by saying I very highly recommend this. If you love games with maps, hex and counts, if you love studying road networks and paths and like a very mobile, fluid game with a lot of movement and a lot of careful consideration about movement with a lot of units. We're not just talking about 10, 20 units here, we're talking about dozens and dozens and dozens all over the board. Then I very highly recommend Ardennes 44. It has been a lot of fun, and I'm just completing it. It's a kind of game, like I said, I'm not going to, but I'm very tempted to set it all up again and play through it all over again. Thanks for watching. I hope that piques your interest. If it is of interest, check out Ardennes 44, 3rd edition from G&T Games. There's 1st, 2nd and 3rd. You should be able to find copies of each available on the second-hand market. Thanks everyone.